Hey guys, this is Hunter Levine, and we're excited to release this podcast with our friend and Homosassa captain, Jim Farrior. Jim is one of the most fun people you will ever be around. He's an old-timer when it comes to fly fishing for tarpon, and Jim is an incredible artist. He paints, he sketches, he builds just these incredible pieces of art. In fact, when I was a kid, I remember my family getting Christmas cards from him where he would hand draw tarpon, bonefish, permit. And I just remember being amazed at his skill. And so I went ahead and put up a few pictures of some of his art on our website at captainscollective.com, so you can check out the post there. And in this episode, we talk about fly tying, the need for patience, how to deal with clients who need help casting and can't cast well. And we have a lot of fun bobbing in and out of other various topics. Captain Jimmy Long from Homosassa Outfitters also hops on this podcast since we recorded it at a place that he regularly frequents called the Poon Bar, and Jimmy and Jim have been longtime friends, fishing and guiding together. We really appreciate all the support you guys have been giving us. Please continue to send us feedback. Feel free to shoot us a message on Facebook or Instagram or email if you have any ideas on how we can continue to grow the podcast. I hope that you guys enjoy. This is the Captain's Collective.
Success is a gift. Excellence is the only thing to strive for.
Out in front of those, tried to eat it. He tried to eat it. Hit him. You got him. He's on.
Two butt caps off the rods, filled them with tequila. We took a shot and out we went.
There ain't no getting into it after that. You're hooked. It's a bad habit.
And all the time Flip's he's standing there ready to go for a tarpon. Anytime he says, "You talk so much, you're like a senator."
He's out there. All right, we're going to take up the line.
Thanks for being on the podcast and hanging out with us. Could you just tell us first, just to start, how you got into fishing and where that began for you?
Fishing, period?
Just in general.
Whoa. I probably caught my first tarpon when I was 5 or 6 down in Boca Grande.
Back in 1920?
Or earlier. Now, we've always tarpon fished. I used to go to Boca Grande as a toddler back when you had to go over on the ferry. And the only boats really fishing the pass were, the old Daniels guide boat, And so we'd go down there for 3 or 4 weeks every summer and spend the time on the beach. We'd go trout fishing, or we'd get a guide and go tarpon fishing. And then my dad learned the pass as good as any of the guides back when you had to go by land markers. There was no depth finders or anything like that. You knew where you were lined up north and south by the range markers, and you knew when you were coming to the inside ledge and when you were coming to the outside ledge. And it was all done by watching marks, which is actually more accurate than nowadays with a depth finder, because with a depth finder, you see the ledge pop up and you tell somebody drop it. Well, back then, you could watch it coming, and you could, just a split second before, you could go drop it. And it would go right over the edge, and that's where you would get bit. So anyway, I've been fishing down there for
Would you
forever.
go down there with your family? Is that who you go down with, your dad? Or
Yeah, we'd spend all summers down there, growing up, all the way through high school, college, and I just got back from there, taking Dad fishing. So he's 93.
93, still
and
catching?
still fishing. Yep.
Man, that's incredible. And then you had worked for the FWC. Is that what when you graduated high school, did you go straight into the Fish and Wildlife Commission?
I went to University of Florida, graduated there, sold advertising for about a year. The public information officer position opened up in the Lakeland office, so I applied for that. And that was in 77. I got the job. Started working for GFC back then, FWC now, and spent 13 years there. Moved up here to go into a private business. Did that for 22 years, and 6 years ago I started guiding. I left that and started guiding.
And really, from 5 years old till today, you've been fishing.
Been fishing and tarpon fishing and whatever. So.
And how did you and we got Jimmy on here too? But how did you two meet?
How did what?
How did you two meet? You and Jimmy?
Oh, just through guides. You know, we knew each other prior to 6 years ago, but once, you know, he got me in the Guides Association, and so we've become pretty close. We're hunting buddies now and stuff since, you know, really then. But we knew each other before. You know, we took some friends from Alabama fishing, I don't know, what, 20 years ago?
Yeah, at least
more.
20, 22 years ago. Yeah. We've known each other for a long time, and we also did some other things with CCA, you know, banquets and stuff like that. You know, we've known each other for probably at least 25 years.
Yeah.
It's just that in the last 6 years since he started guiding, I'm seeing him more and more and more, and he
now he's here in the Poon Bar doing this.
That's right. Now we're down here doing this, and he, you know, Jim's a phenomenal, and we'll get into that, but he's a phenomenal fly fisherman. I think he's been fly fishing here for tarpon longer than I have, but longer than just about anybody that's still alive. It's probably close to 40 years, isn't it?
Pretty close.
You know,
started somewhere around 78, 79. That wasn't, you know, I wasn't full-time fishing here.
you were fun fishing. You were fishing with your buddies Phil and and all
Phil
that.
and I, he was a biologist with the game FWC, and you know, we'd come up here when we had time off from work and tarpon fish. And he's the one that got me started fly fishing.
And this is in the late 1970s?
That was in 77 is when he got me started fly fishing.
Now, how popular was fly fishing for tarpon in the 1970s?
Probably more in the early mid 80s that's when you could be on the sand. The most boats I ever counted was 63. Poland skiffs looking for tarpon. All the big name guys, Billy Pate, everybody, Jimmy's buddy, Dan Malzone, Al the Parrot, all of them.
Well, a lot of the boats, the out of that, and I was guiding also at the time that the 62, 63 boats a day you would see came after the videos, you know, that Billy Pate did for, you know, what was it, In Search of Giant Tarpon or Quest of Giant Tarpon. He came up here, but it was not as many people fly fishing for the tarpon in the late 70s as was in the early to mid 80s, because that's when the word started getting spread, and that's when some of the Keys guides were coming up here. And there was actually only one or two local boys guiding for tarpon back then.
Yeah.
The Billy Pate, Tom Evans, they all brought their guides with them from the Keys, and it's just it's snowballed. It's become such a popular. You know, saltwater fly fishing has done nothing but over the last 20 years has gotten more and more popular.
Yep.
You can tell that by the price of the equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you're saying, so back in the late 70s, early to mid 80s, you'd be out there, you'd see 63 boats. But now, if you had to guess, I mean, what's a
busy day? If you see 15,
you wouldn't see the 63 boats in the late 70s.
right?
You
Yeah,
know, that didn't start
Mid-80s.
happening. Yeah, well, not even. I think it was even a little bit later than that. I would say the early to mid 90s is when, you know, because I started tarpon guiding in 94, and that's when I remember it. Now I don't know what was there, ahead of me, prior to me.
Yeah,
but nowadays, if you see, fortunately, right now, I think a busy day on the flat here, and it's really considered overcrowded, would be 35 boats.
But that's
a busy weekend.
But that's a busy
That's a busy
holiday weekend or something.
Yeah.
Generally, there's
13 to 17 of your full-time tarpon guides.
Yeah.
And that can get crowded if the fish aren't scattered. If they start bunching up, that's crowded.
Yeah.
And how did you get into fly fishing for tarpon?
Well, when I worked for the Game and Fish Commission, that's all the fisheries biologists fly fished. And one of my good friends, Phil Chapman, got me started. And once, you know, I think probably the first fish I caught on a fly was a nice snook, snatched it out from under a dock. And once you do that, It's all over. And then once you put a tarpon in the air on a fly or just see him eat, there ain't no getting into it after that. You're hooked. It's a bad habit.
An expensive habit.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's a bad habit.
And obviously, like, Jimmy was saying, it's snowballed a lot. But back then, I mean, there probably wasn't nearly as much gear. Or were you having to kind of get by with some minimal gear? I mean, what was that time like?
I mean, you had glass rods for the most part. Some, it was just starting to, get in. I've got some old Fenwick, early graphite rods. I've got an old Fenor reel right over there that's, it's smaller than perhaps what you'd fish, as far as arbor size for redfish or anything else. And that's kind of what you had back then.
And you were telling a story at lunch today that was a really good story about fighting a fish for a real long time, and you had 16-pound tests. You said they didn't even have 20-pound tests.
No, that was prior to actually having a line class, a 20-line class. So, yeah, I was fishing with Bill Greer. He was another GFC guy, and he'd brought his shy poke down from Tallahassee, and I met him at Bayport, and we went out of Bayport. Came out fishing. He fished all morning. I poled him. We saw a bunch of fish. Didn't have much luck. Sat down and ate. And at one, he said, "Well, you get up. It's your turn." I go, "Thanks. It's already been all morning." Anyway, so I got up, and here comes a big string. I mean, just a long, probably 100 fish strung out one after another. And I put it in front of the first fish, the 10th fish, the 20th fish. As they're all going by, none of them would eat. They'd all got past us, and I threw a long cast just to the side of the school, stripping it right at them. And that big one turned out and ate it, and that was 10 hours.
10 hours?
10 hours.
And you said you had boat trouble on top of that?
We had boat trouble, which was part of the problem. There was a leak in the gas line on Bill's boat, and so you'd have to pump the boat, crank it up, chase the fish a little bit, get some line back, and bloom. But once it calmed down in the evening, the fish just pulled the boat, pulled us everywhere. Probably pulled us from Pine Island to the Chaz River, back to Pine Island, back to the Chaz River during that time. He just towed the boat. And nothing else, I couldn't do anything with him. We got him up, but wasn't going to stick a kill gaff in him. Wanted to lip gaff him and tape him out and, see what he was. I was pretty sure he was over 100. Caught enough, seen enough in the ice house in Boca Grande, down when almost every fish that was caught was killed. So I had a pretty good handle on what the weight was, and I was pretty sure this fish was over 2. But we wanted to tape it and get the tail under the bow of the boat. Bill would run up with the lift gaff. I'd run to the back of the boat to try to get him back, and the fish would scoot off 20 feet. Stay there for a while, work at him again. Finally just broke off. Right there at the boat, I turned around, sat down, and go, "That's why they call it fishing." So
did you
after
say it
10
that
hours,
calmly?
Yeah, I actually
What did he say?
I actually said it pretty calmly.
Well, I think after 10 hours of tugging on a fish, you probably don't have much energy to get upset about.
Just paddle at that point out of gas.
Well, we were out of
to the ramp.
gas. The GFC that Daylight had sent up a plane looking for us. They knew where I was, and we were getting towed in at that time by a guy who'd been grouper fishing all night, so he towed us in. So anyway,
man, that's an incredible story. Just hearing about the chaos of the motor braking.
It was one of those fish that couldn't jump, even from the get-go. The first 2 jumps, maybe she got 3/4 of her body out of the water, but never cleared. And from then on out, it was mostly just head shaking. So.
And you get back to the boat ramp, is FWC there?
No, they called me. Well, they didn't. Back then, we didn't have cell phones. I drove home and got an ass chewing from my boss.
That was back when they just put your face on a milk carton.
That's right. Back then, for fishermen, it probably was a beer can. But anyway.
Beer can or up at some bar somewhere, just a sketch. just a sketch, a hand done sketch, and and so you start to get into fly fishing, and I've heard and seen that you tie incredible flies. And I know that you also do art, and you have the ability to draw. Do you paint, or do you just?
It's watercolor.
Watercolor.
Mostly now, yeah.
And how did you end up kind of getting full into tying and the artistry of it all?
Well, from the beginning, back when I started fly fishing in 77, 78, I just said, well, you got to tie flies, you got to have them. And, back then it was almost all feathers and, deceiver type patterns, whatever, streamers, but it was almost all done with all natural stuff. And I look at it this way. You got to be able to cast, of course, and something that's obviously never really talked about much, because some people just think it's a matter of presenting a fly and the fish will eat it or he won't. But it's a matter of knowing how to feed a fish, just feeling your fly line, knowing whether you're pulling it, whether you're coming up on it, and i.e. drifting with the wind or the tide or whatever. And it's just a feel that you have. But the third thing, the way I look at it, for me anyway, is, and now that I'm guiding, I get more satisfaction out of hooking any kind of fish, but especially a tarpon, on a fly that I tied, or handing a fly to a customer and having him catch a tarpon on a fly that I tied. And it's happened a bunch, and not always, but I've had people use their own flies and not do anything and put on one of mine and get it. I'm not saying that necessarily means anything. It might have just been in front of a hungry fish. But I just get as making the cast, knowing how to feed one, but feeding the fish your fly is, to me, that's a critical part of fly fishing. That's what makes it fly fishing to me.
Do you use a lot of old time patterns that you first started with, old hipster ponytail hair and all that type of stuff?
No, I use tying all the traditional, tarpon fly patterns, but a lot of it's now done with synthetics,
Yeah, we went from, you didn't throw nothing but feathers, to nowadays you're seeing a lot of EP flies. You're seeing a lot of the synthetics. I mean, you look at the toad.
That's rabbit fur, but it's got a synthetic head.
Yeah,
so.
And I've actually been thinking about, and Jim ties a lot of flies for me because I don't tie flies much anymore, is going back to some of the old traditional flies that we used to use 20, 25 years ago.
And you saw that the last couple of years, that termite that everybody's throwing, that's just splayed grizzly hackle.
Well, it's a miniature cockroach.
Yeah, it's just a miniature cockroach. And but that's been a real effective fly. And now it's got a synthetic head, but traditionally that might have been squirrel tail, or maybe some people tied it with bucktail, but just some natural hair that made the collar or the head, shoulder, whatever. But now you're using a lot of these brush, these EP brushes and stuff. It's just an easy way to make a head. So.
Are you still staying with the natural materials? Is that what you primarily tie with?
Flies like that are mostly natural, but I tie a lot of the Puglisi bait fish patterns, black and purple, and then toads, and that's got usually rabbit fur or stuff. But I've got a little foamy tail thing that I tie up like a toad that I found worked real good. I've even miniaturized them down to permit bonefish size, and it works real good on those too. But
as the season progresses and you get later in the season, you're trying something different, hoping to have something that they haven't seen yet, which is rare, because there are no new patterns, really. It's just a variation of an old pattern tied with new materials.
Yeah, there's a local guy here that he guides, and he's got this fly that he did real good one year on, and he goes, I'm going to patent this fly. And I looked at it, and I go, I've been tying that fly for 20 years. So has everybody else.
And good luck patenting it.
Well, what it is it's his variation of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't think you can patent a fly. Like I told him, you know, when he said that, I said the best thing to do is for you to tie a dozen or so and give them out to your friends, because that's about all you're going to notoriety you're going to get out of it.
The thank you. That's all the thank yous.
You know,
Please,
and there's nothing wrong. No, you know, there's nothing wrong with having that. But, you know, Jim's version of the Puglisi baitfish pattern is a little thicker. Actually, in my opinion, and I use a lot of his flies, is probably in my opinion, it's a better fly. But then again, it's tied at Jim's house. It's not tied overseas somewhere, you know.
Yeah, but most of those bait fish are real. They're real flat. Like if you look at them from the bottom or top, it's, you know, they're not wide. But mine I tie real wide. So if you're looking at it from the bottom, you have a mud minnow, or you've got a bigger silhouette from underneath, which is where the fish is going to see it. So, I mean, that's really
more mullet than pilchard.
Yeah, or mullet, you know, except it's black and purple.
Well, the dark colors.
Best two colors.
Well, yeah.
Well, you could go purple and black.
Yeah. Well,
I've heard you say that, yeah.
Or black. Or purple.
Yeah.
The four colors.
The dark colors create a better silhouette than light colors. And early in the day before the sun gets high, you want dark colors. You know, bright day, bright fly, dark day, dark fly.
But that being said,
it's not written in stone.
I always, when I used to fish with Ted Johnson, just him and I going out of here, you know, at daylight before we had to be to work, I don't know that I ever fished anything other than a bright orange. This is at daylight. I mean, sometimes, you know, still a half an hour before the sun came up, was either bright orange or chartreuse. And that's what everybody fished for the most part. And Phil Chapman said, have you heard anything? Have you used those black and purple Puglisi bait fish patterns? And I go, no. He goes, you need to try one. So I tied some up. And I don't think I've used anything but black and purple since. But I always used to fish, you know, sunrise orange. So times change. And those flies probably still work. I just don't fish them anymore. And don't know too many people that do at daylight. So.
But you have confidence throwing them too, which is nice, you know.
Yep, absolutely.
You hate to throw a fly that you don't believe in front of something, and then...
If you don't have confidence in it, you may as well not throw it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because number one, if you don't have confidence in it, you're not going to fish it right anyway, because you're not going to believe in it. So if you don't believe in that fly, don't throw it.
I think that's another thing that adds into throwing our own flies that we've tied, is we know what's went into them, and we've sort of crafted them for the type of fish we're targeting.
Right. Exactly.
So I think that helps with the attitude of just wanting to throw your own fly. I think that's a big reason why, because if it fails, it's on you. It's not on somebody else.
Yeah. But like Jimmy was saying, you got confidence in the fly, so if you fish it with confidence, chances are you're going to have more success.
And it seems like that's one of the draws to the whole thing. Is it's kind of like archery hunting. You know, it's just there's something primitive about the idea of, hey, I tied this fly and I made this modification, and there's just some sort of primitive aspect to it that's fun, because
well, that's as primitive of equipment as for fishing as you're going to find. A fly rod and reel. I mean, it isn't primitive anymore. I mean, it's all high tech materials. I mean, the rods, the reels, but it's still the most direct way to a fish. If you know what I mean. I mean, you know, you can throw a big, you know, 4/0 pin or whatever, or a big spinning reel of 5,000 spinning reel, but it's just like you said, it's more like shooting a bow at a deer, you know, fooling that fish
it's
on
the I tricked you.
on something that doesn't weigh a quarter of an ounce. You know,
and that's one of the huge arguments too from the guys that say they only tie natural hair and natural fur instead of synthetic, is they like the aspect of using a piece of another animal to trick another animal into into being able to catch that, and that's they like the primitiveness of it, which I understand that.
Yeah. But I don't know that there's a whole lot of people nowadays that actually are strictly natural, you know, hair and stuff. Maybe there are, but there's some synthetics involved in almost all flies now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's few and far between, but there's something about the artistry of it too. And we're sitting here in your kind of renovated lower area of your house.
The Poon
you
Bar.
call it the Poon Bar.
It's the Poon Bar.
And it's a really cool place, and we'll include some notes, some photos in the show notes. But, you know, there's art that you've personally done all across. There's a beautiful light fixture above your pool table. It's got a tarpon drilled into an old feeding trough, and some paintings and drawings. And there's also some fun kind of artistry to it too.
Yeah.
You know, there's something that is enjoyable about the actual act of tying the fly. You know, you're hanging out and you're
trying to make that last head knot as small as you can make it so it finishes nice. You know, this big old gloopy knot.
It's a little arts and crafts time, you know.
Yeah.
If you don't get too careful, it'd be a slippery slope. You'll start putting those little jewels, those little fake diamonds on some denim jackets, and the arts and crafts could get out of control.
Man crafts.
Man
Time
crafts.
flies is man crafts.
Well, let me tell you, if nothing else, it's occupational therapy. I mean, you know, it can be raining. What are you going to do? You can only nap so long, if you're even going to nap. So you can go up and knock out 2 or 3 flies. Although some of the flies I tied take about an hour and stuff. They're very lengthy, but you know, it's still just a fun way to kind of relax, you know, and get your mind off.
If you could only
things.
fish one, what would it be? If you could only fish one pattern,
We know the color.
we know the color.
What's the pattern?
What time of day am I fishing for the rest of my life?
What time do you want to fish?
Daylight, black and
Daylight.
purple.
Yeah.
Either a black and purple toad or a black and purple gleasy. So Jimmy's shaking his head, yeah. But
Well, it's like I told Mike that time. You got your choice. You can have black and purple or purple and black.
yep.
But going back to the colors, I remember the days when the old junkyard dog, you know, sunrise orange, and or chartreuse.
Yeah.
And one year Billy Pate come down here, and you open his fly box, because he was a very sharing person. He would help you. He would show you what he was doing. He opened his fly box, and he's got 24 chartreuse flies in it. That's all he threw all day long. He didn't change flies, you know, much. Now, I'm not saying he never did, but that particular point in time when I seen it, that's all he was throwing. But he had confidence in it. I remember when you and I were throwing chartreuse.
Yep.
You know, one particular story that I thought about a minute ago was I'd had a good morning with a client. We jumped 2 on chartreuse. So I'm telling a couple of my buddies, and I called Jim. I said, Jim, you need to try chartreuse. He said, I've been throwing it for about a month, you know. So he was having luck too.
Is there a certain, when it comes down to some of the details of the gear you use, what type of hooks do you like to use? What type of vise do you have?
Some people are real peculiar about the hooks that they like. Like if I'm tying flies for him, he'll give me the kind of hooks he wants. I don't care, as long as it's a good sturdy hook and sharp. And I've found that, you know, and like tying that little termite fly, which is sometimes tied depending on the hook, because, you know, one manufacturer's like, what is it, that Timco that you like their number 1 is about like the size of a number 5, you know, a 5/0, they're number 1. So that's a real wide gap hook. But, you know, like for the termite, I want a real short hook, a short shank hook. I don't want a hook that's, you know, got an inch long shank. I want, you know, a hook that's got past the point 3/8 of an inch maybe at the most. And it allows you to move those feathers further up on the hook and hide the hook. I don't know. I just like the short shank. But I mean, when I started, everybody was using 5/0 stainless steel Mustad 34-007. That's all anybody fished. And then you spend a half an hour on the bench sharpening each one. So,
you used to have to sharpen all your hooks at 3407 SS.
Yeah.
And you remember we used to use the Mustads, those 2/0 Mustads, that bronze hook.
Yeah.
It's a great hook, but you throw it one day, you better oil it that night or it'll be rusty the next morning.
Yeah.
But it was a good hook.
Yeah. So I'm not.
I've been in the shop with Jimmy before. He likes to, he likes real detailed.
Yeah.
And likes certain hooks, and is there, when it comes to tying gear? I mean, you've been tying flies a long time, and I've heard from multiple people how great and how respected your flies are in particular. I mean, how much time do you spend tying flies? How did you develop into such a good fly tyer?
Just, I guess it's the artist. I mean, you can look in here at some of the things I've drawn and stuff, and I guess it's just maybe an attention to detail and patience. Some of it's trying to figure out a better way to do things. Like I have a technique for making, you could spend 30 minutes trying to pick 4 feathers off a neck to find some that are splayed, where when they put them on the hook, they're splayed opposite. Well, there's an easy solution to that. I pop off 4 feathers, only making sure they're the same size, and you can roll that feather on the shank of a hook, and they'll come out perfect. You just roll one with the inside of the feather, or 2 with the inside of the feather back, 2 with the inside of the feather forward, and when you get them out, you get a little half circle. They're all splayed equally. They're even. These 2 turn out this way. These 2 turn out this way. And you don't get some that go like this and like this. You get a cockeyed splay. But it's a simple thing, and not many people know how to do it. I don't even know how I found out about it. I know if you take your finger over a ribbon, for wrapping a present, go like that over a scissor blade, well, that thing goes whoop, whoop, whoop. So if you take that feather over a hook and bend it around that thing, it'll splay perfect. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Yeah, whoop, whoop, whoop.
Some sound effects. Well,
but anyway, I just, it's just that artistic, I just enjoy doing, just like my watercolors and stuff.
Yeah.
I enjoy.
You take pride in it, and you take the time with it, and that totally connects and makes sense to me.
I mean, back in the old days, guys would take a vise out in the boat, and they'd just tie a quick fly. It wouldn't last long. You might get 1 fish out of it, and or even not even one jump, and they'd pull it back in. There's nothing left, but they would tie flies on the boat. So
whatever works.
I think Jim's reputation as a fly tyer goes in hand with his reputation as an artist, and you would have to see his artwork. You would have to see his Christmas cards. You would have to see the poon bar here and stuff. The way he's just got a natural talent of artistry, and that shows in his fly tying. He spends way more time on a fly than I would. But I'm not complaining because he gets me flies and they work. So, but and I'm always picking at him about being slower than Grandma because he takes his time. So.
Now you're not too picky on your hooks, but I know you're pretty picky on your leaders and your knots, and I've heard y'all two have some discussions. Y'all get pretty fired up
if it
for
works,
guys
like
talking.
Jimmy says, if it works, it works. But everybody's got their, I don't even know the name of half the knots I tie. I mean, like Chip was telling me earlier, well, it's a no slip knot. Well, yeah, okay, that's how I tied it, except the no slip knot goes around your leader about 5 times and back through. Mine goes through a half time, and it holds it just as well. So
the only bad knot's the one that breaks, and if it holds, it's a good knot. And we do go back and forth because I'm a traditional Bimini twist Huffnagel guy. And even doing that, I've modified it a little bit. He's a Slim Beauty.
Well,
and it's a good looking knot.
Not always. Sometimes.
Most of your tarpon flies are Slim Beauty.
This year. Only this year.
And then you're looking at the different knots. I mean, I think on my podcast when we did it here back in August, I was telling you that Cecil Keith you know, an icon in the Keys and there in Alamorada, he did not tie a tarpon fly unless it was looped. All right, Nat Ragland, my mentor, and he's an icon for a marathon, he only snelled, you know, his tarpon flies. And both of them have caught more tarpon than Jim and I will probably ever see, or at least hook. I imagine we probably might have seen some that many, but, you know, who's to question them? Neither one of them was wrong. So,
and I snelled hooks for a while, but it just got to be more of a pain in the rear and to me no more effective than tying a loop knot.
Is there other areas where your artist side comes out in the fishing other than just tying flies? I mean, do you find yourself kind of having that influence other aspects?
In terms of fishing?
Yeah, with being a captain, I mean, obviously you walk into the place that we're recording right now, you look around and you go, okay, there's some thought and intentionality and some artistry that goes into this. Tying flies, that's easy to see. Is there any other places? I mean, that patience, or do you do a lot of photography or anything like that?
No, not as much as not as much as I used to when I worked for the GFC, but no, I mean, I do other things. I've got a leader stretcher that you know, I tie up. That's you know, it's got a teak tarpon on it. The frame is plexiglass, but there's a teak carved tarpon in the leader stretcher. So
yeah, we got some Christmas cards here too. I'll take some photos of these and put them on there. Where did that tradition come from?
God, I started with pencil and pen and ink back eons ago. I don't even remember. I know most people save them because I do sign and number each one, but there's the people I deer hunt with and the Rutlands in Alabama. They have every Christmas card I've ever done in the hunting cabin. It's almost taken up one whole wall of their place. So I've probably been doing it 30 years or more. So that's just, you know, just my way of, you know, giving somebody something special for Christmas. Can't buy them all presents. So
I know my dad has some of those original kind of.
He's got some of the early
sketches.
pen, and then he was just giving me grief for getting them off the list. So
we're trying to hold on to him.
If he'll remember to leave me his address, I'll put him back on the Christmas
He's a little
list.
He's a little bit of a nomad. He's kind of on the run. He might be hard to find. You might have to do an email newsletter.
I
or
think
something
he's
like
sleeping
that for
over
him.
there, if I'm not mistaken.
A Pinterest board or an Instagram account so he can keep up with it. But it is fun just to talk about all the different aspects of fishing. When just to transition a little bit into guiding, what's your favorite part of? You've been doing guiding for about 6 years now.
The worst part is that you're never on the pointy end of the boat. That's the worst part. The best part is I get as much satisfaction nowadays as seeing people hook fish as I do when I hook fish. Maybe not quite as much, but you know, that's a big part. That's the most important. And it doesn't matter whether we're trout fishing or red fishing, you know, or tarpon fishing. Just having somebody else catch a fish is pretty cool, and getting to watch that and watch their face light up, and you know, the smiles and you know, the laughs they have, or when the fish throws the hook, the language sometimes that comes out. Well, let's go get another one. Whatever.
I'm thinking the language that comes out after 10 hours
10
of fighting
hours
and then they
losing
break
the
up.
Actually, it wasn't as bad as I would have thought it was. I just sat down and said, well, why they call
it
it
sounded like
fishing.
you were basically on the fish.
Oh yeah, we could have kill gaffed it for probably the last 4 or 5 hours, but anyway, just didn't want to do that.
And I hear a lot of guides say that, and it kind of, to bring it back full circle back when you're 5 years old and you're down in Boca and you guys are doing the old school drop it over the ledge, and you know, just the thrill of being a kid and catching a fish, and you know, many of us were blessed to have fathers who would take us fishing, and you know, when your dad would take you fishing, you know, depending on how hardcore they are, you're probably not on the polling platform at 7 years old.
Yeah,
like,
they didn't have
you know,
pole. They poled from
standing-
either the top of the motor or the
Yeah.
bow back then. So,
They had motors back then.
they did have motors.
Did
Yes,
have
well,
motors.
not that old.
That was back when they were using bass boats, and but you know, but when you're a kid and your dad would take you out, and he just want to put you on a fish, and then you fish a bunch. And I've heard a lot of guides talk about one of the things they love is that when they're out there with somebody and they're catching a fish, you know, it might be another day, and not saying that every day is another day on the water, but for a guide, but it might be that person's best day of the year.
Yeah.
It could be the best day of their life.
Sure, especially when it comes to tarpon. I mean, you know, there's people that have fished here years and not done well on tarpon at all, and I think that a lot of times comes to the feeding aspect and just feeling your fly and everything, and actually knowing how to get something to chew on it. And some people are, you know, my cousin, you know, he fished up here for years without ever even hooking a tarpon. I think he came up one time, this was after I moved here, and finally hooked one. But his son, if he throws into a school of tarpon or in front of a cruising fish, he gonna get it. I mean, that's the difference. The father just, for some reason, had trouble feeding the fish. The son, no sweat.
With guiding, are there any particular stories from the past 6 years or moments that were really like, wow, that was my favorite moment of guiding for you?
Jimmy's probably got a bunch because he's been after it longer than me. The most frustrating thing, I'm going to switch that a little bit, and I think Jimmy will back this up, is people telling you that they can fly fish, and they come here, they spend the money to get a guide, and they can't throw 30 feet. It's frustrating from a guide standpoint, because you know the fish are there, you know they're going to eat, and yet somebody cannot make a cast. The angler, from a guide's perspective, owes it as much to himself. I mean, to be able to make a decent cast, as he does to the guide. The guide's on the back of the boat poling and working his rear end off to put you on a fish, and yet you can't make a cast. So before you come tarpon fishing, you really need to pick up a tarpon rod,
Especially
and you
tarpon
need
fishing.
to practice. And you need to get where you can throw at least 50 feet, preferably more, and relatively accurate. But, you know, just to come here, if you want to come here and spend your money, but you owe it to yourself, and you really owe it to the guide to, you know, to be as good as you can be with a fly rod.
What do you tell somebody, like let's say I call you and go, hey, I want to come down, I want to tarpon fish, I'm not very good on the fly, you know, I book you I got a year. Like, what would you tell me is the best way to actually try to set it up and get better at casting? How would you coach someone?
Well, first of all, you need to throw a tarpon rod, 11 or a 12. You can throw a 10 weight, and that helps you, you know, if you don't have access to an 11 or 12. But you really, because there's a lot of difference between a 12 and a 10 or a 9 or something like that. You know, a lot of times now I just fish an 11. It's easier for a lot of people to cast. But you need to practice with that. And I don't mean necessarily, it doesn't have to be in a yard, but there needs to be something on the end of the fly line, not just a bare fly line. You cut the bend off of a hook and get out there, you know, cut the bend off of a 4-inch Puglisi bait fish pattern and start throwing it.
Now, not one that you tied, because you probably put 8 hours into it.
Bring that one when you come fishing. Cut one off of one you buy at the store.
Well, the key also is where he's saying practice. And I can tell you, years ago, a friend of mine bought his daughter a tarpon trip for her birthday. And the gift certificate, I had my wife make it up on the computer and everything. And it was practice, practice, practice. And when you get tired of practice, practice some more. And it's not practicing to see how far you can throw it. It's practicing to see how accurate you are at different distances. I'm like Jim. You should be able to throw it at least 50 feet. Most tarpon are going to be hooked between 30 and 50 feet. But if you got to throw it 60 to get the fly in the water, to get them to start tracking it, accuracy is very important. Chip brought up a good point a minute ago when I stepped out. You were talking about the leaders, the flies, and all that. All of this has to come together to be successful. And that includes the practice. Nobody feels worse about a bad shot than the guy that made the bad shot. But
that's self-inflicted a lot of times.
That's self-inflicted, and the guy on the back, he's worked hard for you, and he knows that you feel bad about it. So he's a good one's going to say, all right, let's go find another one. Let's go try it again, and he'll try to help you learn. But it's really important that people practice. I mean, golfers practice, archers practice, quail hunters practice. They go shoot skeet. I mean, it's not anything new. So just practice. I told a guy one time, get a hula hoop, walk around the yard at different angles with the wind in your yard, wherever, and just don't step it off. Just lay that fly in that hula hoop. And it helped him.
When you think about what makes a good guide, what kind of things come to mind for you?
What makes a good guide? Well, we were just talking practice. Patience. And personally, a soft, mellow disposition. There's a lot of guides that get really bent out of shape when people make a bad cast. But like I said earlier, it's really on them, self-inflicted. So, just being easy, mellow, work your butt off, pull your butt off. But, if something doesn't go right, just like Jimmy said earlier, we'll go find another one. Don't get upset at the angler and yell and scream at him. That doesn't do anything.
It doesn't do anybody any good.
Right.
So, and unfortunately, younger in my career, I was very high strung, and yeah. But I have learned over the years, and that was part of when I told you about how much I'd learned from Nat over the phone, was a lot of just, how to deal with different personalities on the boat. If you got an A-type personality and a real aggressive person, sometimes you can get, hey, listen, you need to listen to me. When all else fails, try following instructions. And then there's other people that you may have to, I'm not going to say coddle, but you just got to deliver it a little bit differently. But most tarpon fishermen are going to say, hey, if I mess up, let me know, And I just tell people, look, we all get caught up in the moment. When I quit getting excited, I'm going to get off the platform.
My knees still shake when I'm on the front end and I got one tracking. I still get nervous as heck. And when you lose that, you quit, because it doesn't mean anything anymore. So
that's true.
I heard somebody say with leading people, they were talking about leadership. It's kind of like you got two sides to your hand. You got a soft side, and sometimes you need to know when to use that and be patient, and then you got a hard side of your hand, and you got to know when to let somebody. Because I'm sure there's times where you're on the boat and somebody absolutely just flubs a shot.
Yeah.
And then they look back at you like it was like you didn't get them right. And, because Jimmy said they know when they make a bad cast, but sometimes there's some people
sometimes
don't.
It's hard to convince them that you had them where they needed to be. They just didn't do it.
They're the type of people that go on the American Idol show and nobody ever told them they couldn't sing. Nobody ever told them they couldn't cast very well. So
it's the person that's always going to blame you.
Yeah, it's never their fault.
It's never their fault. But, hey, that's part of guiding. You're going to get every different which of kind. So,
yep.
Is there a particular type of person that you like to guide the most? I mean,
one that can cast.
One that can cast. I mean, do you take a lot of young kids out, or?
I've got a few. My cousin comes up fishes with me 2 or 3 times a year, and he's a guy I was telling you that can feed a fish. He's really just mellow, easygoing, but he gets intense. I mean, if he screws up a fish, and he won't ever point the finger at me. He'll cuss himself under his breath, and he'll get right back at it. So, I love seeing the younger guys coming up in the fly fishing world. Better that than chunking bait for tarpon. And there's guys like, Stump, Jonathan Hamilton, who Jimmy and I know real well. It's a real young guy. He got into it, 5 years ago when we took him fishing, and he's now a very busy fly tarpon guide, and just seeing that and knowing that there's younger guys that are gonna carry on it from a guide perspective, as a guide, I should say, and then the younger people, and because of his internet, he's very savvy with the media, and so he's getting a lot of younger people that are coming in wanting to fly fish. So I think that's very important.
So we're sitting here in the Poon Bar. Very apparent you're passionate about tarpon. Is there a fish anywhere in this world that you haven't caught yet that you would really like to catch on the fly rod?
I haven't decided if I want to catch a sailfish or a marlin or anything like that on a fly.
Billfish?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
I mean, I've caught permit and bonefish on fly. My buddy and I caught 4 or 5 bonefish this past year. We're down there for 1 week, and which I think is pretty good. We can go down there and figure those fish out. We got 1 week and catch them, so, but, I would one day like to catch a keeper grouper on a fly, but, that's pretty much impossible. You can hook them out here all day long, but getting them out of the shallow
winning the fight, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't strip.
You just
fast
need to
enough.
let Jimmy tie your knots. Well,
it's not that. It's just you can't. Once he eats it, you can't strip because you're only in 8-10 feet of water.
Only
and
so
you
much
throw it out
backbone.
over a rock. You're at this angle and you can't reel fast. It's hard to keep him out of the rocks with a plug rod sometimes. But when you hook one on a fly, you can't. You just can't strip fast enough. You can strip, he'll get in a rock, and you can try holding on to him, and maybe he'll come out. I had a lady angler with me 3 years ago and caught one that was a keeper, and it took her about 15 minutes, and about 14 of those was waiting for the fish to swim out from under a rock. She'd just keep the rod tight, and when he moved out, she'd pull on him, and he'd go right back in again. So,
well, if you start figuring that out, you might have a whole nother thing going on down here, man. If you're trying to get grouper on the fly,
well, you can
gotta
catch
talk
him.
to my buddy Jim.
I've caught 34 or 40 fish on a fly early. Most of them are 6 inches to a foot long, but But anyway, but no, I mean, to me, the tarpon's the fish. If you ask me, it's you can go offshore. I've caught a bunch of mahi on flies, and they're fun, but there's nothing like seeing a big old submarine coming straight at you, and you make a good cast and watch that maul open up and suck that little old bitty fly in, and game on. They jump, they run, and they're pretty. So,
well, and you talked about loving to see the next generation of guys who are valuing fly fishing, and obviously there's been a big wave of interest in fly
like
fishing.
you guys.
Yeah, that are interested in what, you've been guiding for 6 years, but you've been fishing since you were 5, and you've been fly fishing since, you said, 1977.
Yeah.
What is it that you're hoping to see and pass down to the next generation?
That they'll take the same passion for it that I do, because if they'll take the passion for it, they will do what's necessary to help preserve the fishery. And that's pretty much plain and simple. Without them, there won't be anything to preserve the fishery. And it doesn't necessarily mean fly fishing, but it seems like fly fishermen are more passionate about the species that they like to pursue, like tarpon, than other people. And that's not, always true, but I think there is a certain passion there that they don't want to see go away.
For conservation.
Yes. Whatever to do, you see the Bonefish and Tarpon Trust thing over there. Well, that's a lot of the people involved in that are fly fishermen. And, so.
Yeah, that seems to be a genuine concern across the board, and people are talking more about the health of the water and the health of the fishery and the populations. And there seems to be, even with technology increasing, just for instance, we're able to sit down and do a podcast, and you're able to sit down with us, but allow others to hear, and people are able to share information and stats and data and all that.
Right.
And
that's a lot of the younger people.
Able to pass it along. Is there anything that you're concerned about with the next generation?
Just
instant gratification. Some of them aren't willing to put the time in. It's.
But that happens with some old folks that come down here wanting to tarpon fish on a fly and can't throw.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about, you see technology, and we talked about that in a previous podcast about the technology, the GPSs, the social media, and all of that. I would be interested in seeing how many young people today would be willing to leave their camera, their cell phone, and that at home and just go fishing and not take a picture and put it on social media. Those are the ones that you will see truly love the sport.
Yeah.
Because it's not about look at me. It's about their one-on-one relationship with the resource. And I'm guilty of not taking enough pictures for my marketing, where I know some guys that they wear out the camera in marketing. But the young people today, there's quite a good group of young guys that fish here right now that are very self-conscious of our area. Some through observing others, and some that have literally, hey, we need to talk. You need to just slow down a little bit. And it's not me saying it necessarily as much as one of their friends saying, hey, just slow down. Enjoy what we got here. That's real important. And Jim has seen the days more so than I did of acres and acres of fish. We have a good fishery, but we don't want it destroyed, because we did go through a spell in the late 90s where it was tough. I mean, you might have 2 schools of 15, 20 fish and 20 boats trying to work them. But it's a lot better now than then. But we want to see it continually get better and better.
And it has. The last 5 years, it's progressively gotten better and better and better. But it's got a long way to go to get back to the way it was. But I think that was a Wednesday. But anyway,
it's encouraging to hear it's getting better, and we'll put all the GPS coordinates in the show notes where you like to go.
People ask me, well, how was tarpon season? And this goes to what I said earlier. Well, if I had somebody that could cast, we caught fish. And it's as simple as that.
How many days did you and I fish together this year? I know we fished a couple, 3 I know.
Yeah, at least 3.
And I don't think there was a day that we didn't catch at least 2. He caught 1, I caught 1. And we had, 7 on one day?
Yeah.
Our best day. And
but that's because we can cast and feed fish. And again, I go back to the learning how to cast, because if you can get the fly to fish, and the further away from the boat, the better, your chances just start going up exponentially.
And that kind of ties into what you talked about with the patience to practice and the patience to get out there and learn and take your time and be intentional. And when we were with Jimmy and we were doing the podcast, the word that kind of stuck out to me was respect, and what it looks like for guides to have respect for one another, and to have respect for everybody who's fishing. But kind of hanging out with you, I think a word that sticks out to me is patience, and what it looks like to have patience with tying the fly, and patience with practice casting and sitting down and learning.
Patience with your angler.
And patience with your angler as a guide.
And and that's critical. But respect is, and everybody's going to screw up. I've screwed up before, and you got too close to somebody or what have you, and but most of the guides around here, even the ones, there's really the bunch that fishes out of Homosassa, and there's a bunch that fish out of Pine Island, but everybody's pretty well connected with each other, and nobody has a problem going, calling one of the Bayport guys and going, hey, Steve, there's about 100 fish moving just inside of you. If you want to, so everybody talks to each other, and, you try not to get too close, but a lot of times, Jimmy and I, if we're near each other and he's on a big school, he'll call me and say, hey, you need to get over here. And we'll work the
Vice
same
versa,
school
he's
of
done
fish.
that for me too.
And so, but, I won't cut him off. He won't cut me. We'll just try to work together on a school of fish or whatever. And it works out sometimes and it doesn't. And sometimes he'll be working fish for a while and I'll poke in there and hook one up and peel off and go on my way, and he'll be going.
Well, you guys got the walkie-talkie system here too, so y'all can really communicate. But well, hey, thanks so much for having us be able to come in and sit down with you. And if people want to follow you and kind of keep up with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
I've got a Facebook page, Captain Jim Farrior. You can look it up. That's the only media I'm on.
Well, you need to start putting some of the
I
art
know.
on there.
Everybody my wife keeps telling me that. Everybody keeps telling me that. So, speaking of the wife, she's looking over my shoulder.
Yeah. She just came in. But thanks for having us on and spending time with us, and we appreciate it.
My pleasure. Absolutely.
Hey, guys, thanks for listening to the Captain's Collective. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please feel free to continue to share it with your friends and give us some feedback if you have any ideas about some captains or guests that we should have on the show. Hope you guys enjoyed. Till next time, this is the Captain's Collective.